If you're listening to this right now, I want you to get comfortable. Pull your blanket a little closer. Let the pillow hold the weight of your head. Whatever happened today, whatever was heavy or sharp or unfinished, you can set it down for a while. I'm going to tell you a story. My story. And I think, somewhere in it, you might find a piece of yours. My name is James Calloway, and I want to tell you about the years when I had nothing, and what happened when I stopped being afraid of that. There is a specific kind of cold that settles into a car in November in Ohio. It isn't the dramatic cold of a blizzard. Nothing cinematic about it. It's the slow, creeping cold that finds the gaps in the door seals, and the cracks where the weather stripping has worn thin. It pulls around your ankles first. Then it climbs. By 3 a.m, it has settled into your shoulders and the back of your neck, and no matter how tightly you pull your jacket around yourself, it finds a way in. I know that cold the way you know an old, unwanted neighbor. I slept in my car for 61 nights. The car was a 2003 Honda Accord, silver, with a cracked rear taillight and a passenger side mirror held on with electrical tape. I had a sleeping bag I'd bought at a Goodwill for $4. Forest green, rated for temperatures down to 40 degrees, though whoever wrote that on the tag had clearly never tested it in Ohio November. I had a gym bag in the back seat with 3 changes of clothes, a toiletries kit, a worn copy of a John Steinbeck novel someone had left on a park bench, and a phone charger I ran from the cigarette lighter. I kept the engine off to save gas, except for 20-minute stretches when the cold became genuinely dangerous. Then I'd turn the key, listen to the Accord shudder awake, and sit with my hands pressed against the heating vents like I was praying to them. I was 31 years old. I want to be clear about something, because I think it matters. I did not end up in that car because of bad luck alone. I ended up there because of a long series of choices I'd made from a place of fear, and a few choices that were made for me, and the particular way those two things braided together into something I couldn't untangle for a long time. I'd grown up in Milford, Ohio. Small town, about 8,000 people, the kind of place where everyone knows, everyone's business, and the high school football team is a genuine civic religion. My father worked at a parts distribution warehouse on Route 9. My mother cleaned houses 3 days a week and worked the register at a fabric store the other 2. They were good people, tired people. They loved me in the way that people who are always working love their children deeply, but from a distance, with more worry than warmth most of the time. I was not a remarkable student. I was not remarkable at anything, actually, which is its own kind of pain when you're young. I watched the kids around me find their things: baseball, theater, mechanics, math, and I kept waiting to find mine. I never quite did. I graduated high school with a C+ average and a vague, formless anxiety about the future that I managed mostly by not thinking about it. I took a job at the same warehouse where my father worked. Not because I wanted to, but because it was there, and I didn't know what else to do. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself that for 6 years. Then my father had a heart attack. He survived, but it shook something loose in me. Watching him in that hospital bed, pale and small in a way he'd never seemed before, I thought, this is what a temporary life looks like when it becomes permanent. I quit the warehouse 2 weeks after he came home. I enrolled in the community college in Dayton to study business administration, which wasn't a passion but felt like a direction. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood where the streetlights worked about half the time. For 2 years, things were okay. Not good. Okay. I worked evenings at a diner, took classes in the morning, slept in the afternoons. I met a woman named Rachel at the diner, a nursing student who laughed at my jokes and made strong coffee and seemed to see something in me I couldn't quite see in myself. We dated for 1.5 years. I thought we were building something. Then the diner closed. Owner retired, gave us all 2 weeks' notice and a card. I picked up shifts at a grocery store, but the hours were unpredictable and the pay was worse. Rachel and I started arguing about money, about my lack of direction, about the gap between who she thought I was and who I actually seemed to be. She wasn't wrong, exactly. She just wasn't gentle about being right. She moved out in April. I fell behind on rent in May. By July, the landlord had started the formal eviction process. I couch-surfed for a few weeks. A college friend, then a cousin in Dayton, then a guy from my business class who had a spare room, and didn't ask too many questions. But I could feel myself wearing out my welcome everywhere I landed, the way you can feel a conversation turning before anyone says anything. By October, I was in the car. The parking lots I slept in had a particular geography I came to know well. The Walmart on State Route 4 was the most reliable. Big, well-lit, active enough at all hours that a single car sitting overnight didn't attract attention. There was a 24-hour McDonald's 300 yards away where I could use the bathroom and buy a small coffee that cost $1 and sat in my stomach, like hot gravel. I learned which employees came on at what time, which ones would look at me with that particular flatness that meant they'd figured out my situation, and which ones just handed over the coffee without making it mean anything. There was a truck stop on the edge of town where the showers cost $8. I went twice a week when I could afford it, sometimes less. I had learned to use the gym at the community college. My enrollment was technically still active, though I hadn't attended class in weeks, and the showers there were free. I timed it carefully. Early morning, 7 to 8, before the place got busy. I'd go in with my gym bag, take a long shower, stand in front of the mirror for a minute looking at my own face, and try to find something in it that wasn't defeat. The face looking back at me was thin. I'd lost about 15 pounds since the summer. Not intentionally, just the natural consequence of eating inconsistently and walking more than I used to. There were shadows under my eyes that hadn't been there before. My hair was getting long in a way I didn't like. I started cutting it myself with a pair of scissors I found at the bottom of my gym bag, using the bathroom mirror at the truck stop, doing a worse job each time. I want to tell you honestly what it feels like to have nothing, because I think we're sometimes romantic about poverty in a way that doesn't serve anyone. It doesn't feel clarifying. It doesn't feel like the beginning of a story. It feels like the end of one. It feels like shame. A constant, low-frequency shame that sits in your chest from the moment you open your eyes in the morning and doesn't leave. It feels like invisibility and hypervisibility at the same time, like you are both nowhere and everywhere, like every person who looks at you is calculating what you are. And here is the thing about shame. It is exhausting. It takes an enormous amount of energy to carry shame, to manage it, to make sure it doesn't show on your face in the line at the food pantry or the library or the McDonald's. By the time I'd managed my shame through a day, I had almost nothing left over for anything else. Not hope, not planning, not the simple, ordinary optimism that people who've never been without take for granted, the way they take gravity for granted. I think about that a lot now. How much energy shame consumes. How it is the single biggest tax on people who already have the least. It was a Tuesday in the second week of November when I met Frank Okafor. The library in Milford is a Carnegie library, one of those beautiful early 20th century buildings with limestone columns and tall windows, and a reading room with wooden tables that seem to have been there since before time. I'd been spending my afternoons there since October. It was warm. It had outlets. The librarians were professionally incurious about the people who sat for hours without checking out a book. It was one of the few places in my daily life where I didn't feel like I was trespassing. I was sitting at one of the long tables in the reading room, working on a resume on one of the library computers, or trying to, anyway. The resume was a problem. I'd been out of consistent employment for months. My community college enrollment was incomplete. My last real reference was the diner, which no longer existed. I was staring at a white document with my name at the top and almost nothing beneath it, and I felt like the document was telling me something I already knew about myself. Frank sat down across the table from me. He was maybe 60, maybe 65, with the kind of face that has been weathered into something, pleasant rather than worn down. Dark skin, close-cropped grey hair, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He had a stack of books beside him and a yellow, legal pad, and he was writing on the pad in a fast, decisive hand. He didn't look at me when he sat down, and I didn't look at him, and for about 20 minutes we just existed in the same quiet. Then he pushed a book across the table without saying anything. I looked at it. It was a slim paperback, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. I'd heard of it but never read it. I looked up at him. "You look like you're in a fight with yourself," he said. His voice was quiet, measured, like he'd practiced being calm for a long time, and it had become natural. I didn't know what to say to that. I thought about being offended. Instead I said, "I'm trying to write a resume." He looked at the book. "Read that first. The resume can wait 15 minutes. I don't know why I listened to him. I almost didn't, but something about the directness of it, the complete absence of pity in his voice, the way he said it like it was just practical advice and not charity, made me pick up the book. I read the first 20 pages there at that table. By the time I put it down, something had shifted very slightly in my chest. Not a revolution, not an awakening, just a very small, very quiet rearrangement. Frank was still writing on his legal pad. Without looking up, he said, "Better?" "A little," I said. He nodded like that was the correct answer. Then he extended his hand across the table. "Frank Okafor. I teach at Wright State. Business ethics and organizational behavior." I shook his hand. "James Calloway. What are you working on, James?" And I told him. I don't know why I told him everything. The warehouse, the community college, Rachel, the apartment, the car. Maybe because he'd asked in a way that assumed I had something worth saying. Maybe because I hadn't had a real conversation in so long that the words came out like water from a faucet that's been turned off for months. Maybe because he listened the way some rare people listen, without waiting for you to finish so they can respond, but actually following each word, actually present. When I was done, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What do you want, James? Not what do you need. What do you want?" No one had asked me that in years. Possibly no one had ever asked me that. "I don't know," I said honestly. "That's the first true thing you've said," he said. So we start there. I don't want to make Frank into something he wasn't. He wasn't a mentor in the movie sense. He didn't hand me a business plan or introduce M to investors or give me a briefcase full of wisdom. He was just a person who had some time on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons and was willing to spend some of it talking to me. We met at the library 5 more times over the next 3 weeks. He brought coffee in a thermos the second time and poured me a cup without asking. He lent me 3 books, Frankl, then a thin collection of Stoic writing, then a business biography I probably wouldn't have picked myself. We talked about what I'd read. We talked about what I wanted, circling back to that question each time, getting a little closer each time. What I learned, slowly, was that I had been treating my life like a problem that had already been decided. Like the verdict was in, and I was just waiting for the sentence. And some of that was circumstance, the job, the apartment, the car. But a lot of it was something I was doing to myself. A kind of preemptive surrender. An assumption that whatever I tried would not be enough. So why try very hard at all? Frank called it protective smallness. He said, "You make yourself small so that when things go wrong, you can say you weren't really trying. It feels safer." It isn't. That one landed hard. I thought about it for days. I turned it over in the sleeping bag in the back seat of the Accord, watching my breath cloud in the cold air, and I thought, yes, That is exactly what I have been doing since I was 17 years old. I have been hedging my entire life. The third week of November, Frank told me about a small business development center attached to the Dayton Chamber of Commerce that offered free business planning, workshops, and small microgrants to people in difficult circumstances. He wrote down the name and the address on a piece of yellow, legal pad paper and handed it across the table. "I'm not telling you to do this," he said. "I'm telling you it exists." I put the paper in my jacket pocket. I kept it there for 4 days before I called. Here, I have to tell you about something I made. This is the part of the story that might sound small if I describe it wrong, so I want to be careful. Because the thing I'm about to tell you about wasn't big in the beginning. It was about as small as something can be and still exist. I had started baking bread. This requires some explanation. There was a woman named Donna who ran the food pantry at St. Michael's Church, 2 blocks from the library. I'd been going there on Fridays for a month. Donna was in her 50s, heavyset, with reading glasses on a beaded chain and a way of handing you your brown paper bag like she was giving you something she was proud of, which I appreciated more than I knew how to say. One Friday in November, she was short-staffed and I offered to help. I spent 3 hours that afternoon sorting donations and stocking shelves. And at the end of it, Donna gave me a bag with, among other things, a 5-pound sack of bread flour, a packet of yeast, and a jar of honey that had been donated by someone who had apparently gone through a honey phase. The problem was that I had nowhere to bake bread. I had a car, but I had also by this point been spending time at a community warming center that operated out of a church basement on Elm Street, a place that opened in the evenings for people without shelter, with cots and a television, and a kitchen where volunteers made soup. I'd been sleeping there some nights when the temperature dropped below 20, which was more often now, and the kitchen at the warming center had an oven. I asked one of the volunteers if I could use the oven on a Sunday morning before they opened. She said yes. I had never baked bread before in my life. I watched 3 YouTube videos on the library computers on a Saturday afternoon, took notes on the back of an old receipt, and showed up at the warming center kitchen at 6 in the morning on Sunday, with my flour and my yeast and my honey, and an uncertainty so complete, I nearly turned around twice on the walkover. The first loaf was terrible. Dense, underproofed, with a gummy interior and a bottom that had scorched slightly where the oven ran hot. I ate it anyway, standing at the warming center kitchen counter, and I felt something that surprised me. I felt like I had made something. I know that sounds like nothing. But here is what I want you to understand. For months, my entire existence had been reactive. I was responding to cold, to hunger, to exhaustion, to the daily logistics of having nothing. I was surviving. Surviving is not making. Surviving is just the absence of not surviving. But standing in that kitchen with a bad loaf of bread that I had made with my own hands, I felt, for the first time in a very long time, like an agent rather than an object. Like someone who acts on the world rather than someone the world acts on. I baked every Sunday for the next 3 weeks. By the 4th week, the loaves were genuinely good. The warming center volunteers started looking forward to Sundays. Donna from the food pantry tried a slice and asked if I'd ever just considered selling them. I laughed. She didn't. The microgrant workshop at the Dayton Business Development Center met on Wednesday evenings in a conference room that smelled like dry erase markers and burnt coffee. There were 12 people in the first session. A woman who made candles. A man who repaired small appliances. A teenager with a lawn care idea. And me, with nothing yet except a vague and terrifying thought about bread. The workshop facilitator was a woman named Patricia Nguyen. Small, precise, with the energy of someone who has heard every excuse in the world, and has enormous patience for exactly none of them. She gave us a single sheet of paper on the first night with 3 questions. What can you do that other people find valuable? Who specifically needs what you can do? What is the smallest possible version of this that you could start tomorrow? I stared at those questions for a long time. I wrote, I can bake bread that people like. People who want fresh, honest, local bread. Tomorrow, bake a dozen loaves and ask Donna if I can sell them out of the food pantry on Saturday. Patricia looked at my sheet and said, This is the most honest answer in the room. Go do it. I need to tell you about the Saturday I first sold bread, because I want to get it right. I baked 12 loaves on the Friday evening, using the warming center kitchen. Simple sourdough, a recipe I'd built from the 3 YouTube videos and 6 weeks of Sunday mornings. Each loaf took about 4 hours from mixing to cooling, and I stayed in that kitchen until 1 in the morning, and when I finally walked back to the car in the cold night air, I was carrying 12 loaves of bread, wrapped in clean dish towels, and I felt ridiculous and alive. Donna set up a small table at the entrance to the food pantry. I had a handwritten sign, $8 a loaf, which Patricia had told me was below market but appropriate for a start. By 11 in the morning, all 12 loaves were gone. $96 in a coffee tin. I sat in the center volunteers started looking forward to Sundays. $96 was not a life. It was not salvation. It was not the end of sleeping in a car. But it was evidence. Evidence that the thing I had made had value to other people. That I was not making something up. That the small, terrifying voice that had started saying maybe when I stood in that kitchen on Sunday mornings was not lying to me. I drove to Donna's house. She'd given me her dress for a different reason weeks earlier, and I knocked on her door, and when she answered I said, I need a kitchen. I can pay rent. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, Come in. My kitchen is the size of a football field and my husband hasn't cooked anything in it in 30 years. The next 4 months were the hardest work of my life. I want to be honest about this because I think we sometimes tell stories of rising up that skip over the middle part, the part that is just labor, and doubt and exhaustion, and more labor, the part that is not inspiring in any moment-to-moment sense but is the only thing that makes the end of the story possible. I rented Donna's kitchen for $50 a week, which was all I had to offer. I started baking 4 days a week, Fridays through Mondays, producing between 30 and 60 loaves per session. I sold at the food pantry on Saturdays. I sold at a small farmer's market that Patricia helped me apply to. I sold from the trunk of the Accord in a parking lot on Tuesday afternoons, which was illegal in a technical sense, and which I did not think about too hard. I found a room to rent in February, $300 a month, a single room in a house with 2 other renters, with a shared bathroom and a kitchen I was not allowed to use for commercial baking. I slept in an actual bed for the first time in months, and I lay there in the dark feeling the mattress beneath me, and I cried. Quietly, the way you cry when the relief is so large it has to come out of you somehow. By March, I had a waiting list for Saturday bread. By April, 2 restaurants in Dayton had reached out. One through the farmer's market, one through a customer who worked there, asking if I could supply loaves on a weekly basis. The microgrant came through in May, $3,000, which sounds small until you have been living on nothing, at which point it sounds like a cathedral. I used it to buy a commercial-grade stand mixer, and a proofing basket set, and, most importantly, to get my Ohio cottage food license, which meant I could legally sell directly to customers without a commercial kitchen, though by then I was also renting time at a certified kitchen facility in Dayton, 2 mornings a week. Frank came to the farmer's market in June. He bought 2 loaves of bread and a small jar of the honey butter I'd started making, and he looked at my little folding table with its cloth and its handwritten chalkboard sign, Callaway's bread, baked in small batches in Milford, Ohio, and he said, There it is, I said. What do you want now? He asked, old question. Different answer coming. I want a bakery, I said. A real one. With a door and a window and a table where people can sit. He nodded like that was the right answer. Then write that down, I want to stop here for a moment and talk about what I learned, because I think it matters more than the timeline. I learned that starting is not the same as being ready. I was not ready when I walked into that warming center kitchen for the first time. I had watched 3 videos and taken notes on a receipt. I was profoundly unready. But I went anyway, and the going taught me what I could not have learned by preparing. I learned that shame is a liar. Shame told me that my circumstances made me lesser, that being without money or address or direction was a verdict on who I was as a person. It was not. It was a circumstance. A terrible, hard, real circumstance, but a circumstance nonetheless. I was not my car. I was not my empty resume. I was whatever I did next. I learned that help and charity are different things, and that being able to tell the difference matters. Frank did not give me anything except attention and honesty and an occasional cup of coffee. Donna gave me access to a kitchen in exchange for money. Patricia gave me a framework and then expected me to use it. None of them rescued me. They just stood near enough that I could see them, and seeing them helped me see what was possible. I learned that the smallest possible version of a thing is always worth doing. My first loaf of bread was terrible. My first Saturday of sales was 12 loaves and $96. Everything that came after was built on those terrible small beginnings. We want to start big because starting small feels embarrassing. But the big things are almost never built any other way. And I learned, this one took the longest, that having nothing is not the same as being nothing. It feels like the same thing when you're in it. The cold and the shame and the invisible weight of it make it feel like a statement about your worth. It isn't, it's a weather condition. And weather changes. Callaway's Bread opened on March 14th of the following year, in a small storefront on Birch Street in Milford. It had been a tax preparation office. The previous tenant had left a carpet, the color of old mustard and overhead fluorescent lights that buzzed at a frequency I found deeply unpleasant. I replaced the carpet with wide plank pine I found at a salvage place outside of Dayton. I replaced the fluorescent lights with warm pendant bulbs. I painted the walls the color of unbleached flour. I put 3 small tables with mismatched chairs in the window. My opening inventory was 8 varieties of bread, 2 types of butter, and a pot of very strong coffee. The line on opening day went out the door and down half a block. I know how that sounds, like something from a movie, like Too Good to Be True. But Milford is a small town, and I had been selling at the farmer's market for 9 months, and people had been waiting for this. Small towns will show up for their own. It is one of the things I love about them. I stood behind the counter that morning in an apron I'd bought at a kitchen supply store in Dayton, and I watched people carry out loaves of bread I had made with my hands, and something in my chest felt so full I didn't know what to call it. Not pride exactly. Not happiness exactly. Something larger and quieter than either of those words. Something like, I am here. I built this. This is real. Donna was the 4th person in line. She bought 3 loaves and hugged me for a long time over the counter. Frank came in at mid-morning, waited in line like everyone else, paid for his loaves like everyone else, and sat at one of the window tables with his coffee and his yellow legal pad. I found a moment to sit across from him. How does it feel? He asked. Terrifying, I said. And exactly right, he smiled. That's what it feels like when you're living in the right direction. I'm going to tell you where I am now, because I think you deserve to know how it ends. Or rather, how it continues. Because it doesn't end. Callaway's Bread has been open for 2.5 years. We have 4 employees now. Mara, who has been with me since the 2nd month and who makes our pastries. Danny, who handles the morning baking shift. Alicia, who manages the counter and the wholesale orders. And a part-time delivery driver named Pete, who is 70 years old and has never once been late. We supply 7 restaurants in Dayton and Milford, a small grocery co-op, and a hotel downtown that puts a half loaf of our sourdough in every welcome basket. The The store smells every morning like bread and coffee and the particular warmth of a wood flower kind of place. People bring their laptops and their books. People sit at the window tables for long stretches. A man proposed to his girlfriend at the middle table on a Tuesday morning in January, and she said yes, and everyone in the bakery applauded. And it was embarrassing and wonderful. I still live in a rented apartment. I drive a 2019 Accord now, blue with working mirrors. I sleep in a bed every night. I eat regular meals. These things are not small. Frank retired from Wright State last spring. He still comes in on Thursday mornings. I have his coffee ready. Black, no sugar. And sometimes we talk, and sometimes we just exist in the same warm room, which is its own kind of conversation. I go back to the warming center on Elm Street once a month. I bring bread. I sit in the kitchen sometimes, in the same chair where I used to sit in the early mornings, before my first Sunday bakes, and I let myself remember exactly what it felt like to be there. I don't let myself forget. I think forgetting would be a betrayal of something important of the person I was in that car, who was still worth something even when he couldn't see it. Here is what I want you to take with you into sleep tonight. You may be in a hard place right now. You may be carrying something that feels too heavy for one person. You may have looked at your life recently and felt that terrible, specific despair of not knowing how to close the distance between where you are and where you want to be. I know that place. I lived in it for a long time. But here's what I also know. The distance is not fixed. It is not permanent. It is not a verdict. It is a gap. And gaps can be crossed. And you do not have to cross the whole thing at once. You only have to take the next small step. The most embarrassingly, humblingly small step you can take, and then take it. Find the kitchen that will let you in. Bake the terrible first loaf. Count the $96 twice. You are not your circumstances. You never were. You are what you do next and next and next. The world is full of people who were written off. By others, by circumstances, by their own exhausted hearts, and who kept going anyway. Who got up in the cold morning and drove to the library, and accepted the book that a stranger pushed across a table and read the first 20 pages and felt something shift, very slightly, in their chest. That shifting is the beginning. That shifting is everything. Let your body relax now. Let the weight of this day fall away from your shoulders, from your hands, from behind your eyes. The story is done. You are safe. You are warm. Outside, the night is doing what it always does. Holding the world gently while it rests, keeping the stars in their places, letting the dark be soft rather than frightening. You've made it to this moment. That counts for more than you know. Sleep well. Dream something good. Whatever you're building, however small, however slow, however uncertain it feels right now, it matters. You matter. I'll be right here. Good night.